Be yourself, be positive. Just another mindset.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a new episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast. We need a paradigm shift if it comes to our economic and social systems. Let us drive this change together. The Just Another Mindset podcast shares inspiration and tangible techniques on how to create seismic shifts in an outdated system, collectively and for individuals alike. My name is Ismael, and each week I bring to you a relevant conversation, message, or theme that will not only entertain you, but help you to change towards a more meaningful and satisfying life. Get encouraged by listening to successful thought leaders, inspiring individuals, and impressive changemakers. Change from within will last and create positive results for all of us. Let us get inspired and embrace collective changes for the better. Tiffany Barnard is a successful entrepreneur, a grateful mom, and she works as a communications and life coach, helping individuals and groups to gain more clarity and communicate better. In this episode, we talk about communication. Tiffany has learned the hard way that communication is essential in life. Today, she coaches communication, and you will learn about words not to use and different communication styles. We talk about her very personal story, and we elaborate on what triggers are and how one can deal with them. We discuss the importance of knowing your values and the fact that one has choices in life. You will hear why asking for help is so essential in life and what role trust and vulnerability play in that. Wonderful. And with that, Tiffany, a warm welcome to the Just Another Mindset podcast. And my first question for you today is, how do you feel and what is on your mind?
Well, thank you very much for having me here, Ismael. I'm very happy to be here. How do I feel? I feel good, actually. I feel good. I feel energized. And what is on my mind? Hope and gratitude is on my mind. Hope and gratitude. And I have to say a lot of pride as being a mum. So yes, hope and gratitude and a little bit of pride.
Thank you very much for that. And I suppose that's a very good combination, energized hope and gratitude. And Tiffany, maybe we can give a little bit of a context for our audience listening. You are a personal development and a communications coach, but you have not always been that. And I would be very interested if you could talk us through parts of your journey, let's just call it, and what made you become a coach after all.
This is very true. I was not always a coach. I've been in business my entire life. I graduated university at the tender age of 20. Looking back, I should maybe have chosen, maybe to stay a little bit longer, but I was precocious and keen to start. And after graduating university, I went into the family business, which was a hotel, which I was working alongside my dad. And 6 years after that, I set up my own company, which still exists, a facilities management company, which is great, but doesn't ignite any passion in me. It paid the bills, I'm very grateful for the experiences that I had as a result of that company. But it wasn't until I discovered coaching that I truly understood what passion meant. Because up until then, passion to me was something that artists had. You could only be passionate if you were creative. But then I discovered, as I said, life coaching, and I started coaching and just, it feeds my soul in a way that being in business never did. So my journey has been interesting. My journey has taken me from Tanzania to France and now here to Spain, where we settled, my children and I, 10 years ago after the death of their father. So we were kind of catapulted, let's say, out of Tanzania and into Europe. And once I was here, I decided to stay. My parents decided to join me. They were in Oman, and my brother also came over. He was in the UK, so we were quite an international family all over the world, and found ourselves together here in what is possibly one of the smallest ports in the world. Which was fabulous for me, being able to come back together, being able to see each other whenever we wanted to, was simply amazing. I have to say that my brother chickened out a couple of years ago, and he's actually moved a little bit further away. But my parents are still here. And it was about 4 years ago, that I was looking to do something here, and I got stuck in this rut, which I think a lot of people do, of what can I do? Well, this is what I've done before, and really focusing on what you've done before and trying to project yourself into the future, using that as a basis. And as I said to you, the whole business thing never really excited me. So I was not very passionate about finding anything. And then my Spanish is very, very conversational. Not one of the languages that I speak. So I got stuck on that. I can't do anything. So it was all very negative. And then my husband suggested to me that, maybe I should have a look at what interests me rather than what I've been doing before. And human behavior is always something that I've loved. I love meeting people. I love watching them, how they work, how they interact, how they think. All of that psychology just is fascinating to me. So I started doing some courses for the sake of doing some courses, really, and thought, well, maybe I could retrain as a therapist, which, as it turned out, wasn't an option because I'd have to have gone to university, and then we had the whole language thing that came in again. So that was when I found life coaching, and I thought that's just brilliant. It actually suited me far better because therapy is sort of backward facing. It looks at the past, it takes care of the past, helps you to understand, accept, and digest. And once you've done that, then you go to a life coach who helps you move forward. So we're very forward thinking as coaches. And it was just simply perfect. And really the rest of it's just been a blur to me. So, and that's how I ended up here sitting in front of you today.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that, Tiffany. And I would be very interested. You talked about life coaching and about goals, about looking forward. And you also call yourself a communications coach. And I would be interested, why is communication such an important component of our lives?
Oh, of our lives, and also just so fundamental to me in everything that I do. So communications is something we all believe we're very good at. We can all talk. We all talk. We've been talking since we were small. But unfortunately, very few of us are actually good at it. We've never really been taught how to do it. And my sort of journey into communications really came as a result of my children. So after their dad died, our communication became about anything except that. So we didn't talk about what had happened. For me, from my side, the emotions were too much. I was afraid. I was afraid of going there. I didn't want to talk about them. I was in survival mode. And as long as I ignored everything that was happening, I could carry on. I had 2 young kids in the company to run at the same time. And my company and my children were not in the same country. So I like to make things a little bit, complicated.
How old were your children then?
9, and my daughter was 13. She just turned 13. So they were small. And so because my kids saw me being this sort of strong figure, what they thought was being strong, they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to break down. They didn't want to show emotion because, they were getting their cues from me. And to cut a long story short, about 8 years later, finally I got the courage to start talking about it. And I realized at that point that we'd been dancing around this massive great elephant in the room for all of that time. All of us having things that we wanted to say, all of us having things that we needed to say. There was a lot of there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of shame for everybody. And none of us, I think from my point of view, in any case, I can only talk from my point of view. I was waiting for cues from them. For example, on the anniversary of their dad's death, do you talk about it? Are they thinking about it? Do they realize what the day is? So in the end, it's like you overthink it to death and say nothing. And then you find out 8 years later that there's a little bit of resentment that's built up because you didn't say anything about it. So communication just became so fundamentally important. And I realized just how important it is to have those conversations that we're scared about, to have the courage to show emotions, to understand that the words that we use, we know what we mean, but we can never be sure of what is being heard. Certain words that should never be used in conversations, all of these things became so apparent to me. And I'm not going to claim to be an expert in any way, because I'm still learning, and I'm still, we all have times where you just choose not to understand. I don't want to understand. I choose to be in a bad mood. It's we get triggered. But because of my kids, and because we had to navigate this particular elephant, I always call it an elephant, we had to navigate that together. All three of us in very different ways individually, different ways together. It's a subject that is so close to my heart, because really there was a lot of pain that was caused because of a lack of communication.
Thank you very much. And yeah, what I hear is indeed that life taught you a very lengthy, and I'm assuming very painful lesson, and that you learned from it, or are still learning from it, and you want to help and enable other individuals and groups to communicate with themselves or among one another. And if you want to talk it, or then it would be interesting, how has the relationship with your children changed since you communicate better and more openly? Is that a very active change that you realize?
It's a very active change, especially with my daughter. My daughter is very much focused on protecting me, not wanting me to be upset, not wanting any, and then obviously me with both my children. That's how I am. So, for example, and she's super, empathetic doesn't even start to describe my daughter. She's like tuned in to everybody's vibes in a very, very, I think, unique way. So the thing is, I am as well. So, it's like I can tell when something's wrong. What's going on? She'd be like, nothing. And I'd be like, no, tell me. She'd be like, nothing. And what would happen before would be, I would be frustrated because I knew something was going on. She would be frustrated because I kept forcing the issue. And we'd end up having an argument, which would inevitably end up with her in tears and me thoroughly pissed off. Now, we talk about it. We know it's a safe space. We also understand that if tears come, that's also fine, because energy has to be released. And it's, when you can talk together with somebody, know that you're safe, know there's no judgment. And this is one of the really big things, is I had a lot of guilt and shame that I was carrying around because, I should have done this better, or I should have done that better. And a lot of judgment, which was wrong of me because I'm not the same person today. So how can I judge myself back then? It's only in the future that we look back and see mistakes, but there were no mistakes. We're just simply doing the best that we can at the time. So the thing is also having the courage to talk about this with my daughter, especially. She has done so much to help me put down that particular bag, saying, we know what you were going through. We know what you were feeling. We know you were doing the best that you could. We know the stuff that we don't know, that you had to deal with. So, and those conversations that, yes, they inevitably end in tears, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And the understanding that those emotions are there to be felt, that they have to be felt. Because if you don't feel them, they will come and they will bite you. right when you don't need them to. So that's with my daughter. With my son, it's slightly different. He's very like me. He wants everybody to be, everybody has to be fine. He will be fine, but he doesn't think about him. He thinks about everybody else. And so with him, it was important for me to get across to him that he was in a safe space, and that I worry because I'm his mum, and that there's nothing he's going to do to stop that. At the same time, if he promises to communicate when there's a problem, I promise not to be a pain in the neck. So we kind of, by understanding each other and by actually talking about what it is that we both need. So he needed his peace, I needed my peace of mind. How can we give each other what we need? And we came to an understanding. And I said to him, I said, I know that I seem like a nag, but I am going to check in with you, every once in a while, and I'll ask you, how's it going? And, if there's something that's not going well, please tell me. And so we have this now, this open line of open communication, let's say, or open line of communication rather. So it's the communication has changed fundamentally on both sides and in very different ways.
And it sounds like you guys, at least among one another, created a whole lot more trust to also allow such open communication to take place and to allow all the emotions and feelings to be felt in a way, but to know that whatever comes up can and in fact should be shared. At least that's what I hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that it's going to be done without judgment, because, when there's a lack of communication, it's very easy to take things personally. We feel, for example, it's like you always say, well, if you start off like that, the person who you're talking to is going to be on the defensive immediately. They feel as if they have to defend themselves. So just understanding that, there are certain things or certain ways from my standpoint as the mother, don't go there. Don't start conversations like that. So the words that I choose, I'm very careful with how I choose them, because I want them to be received with the love that they're given. And sometimes that get lost. So, we also careful to understand there is no judgment, that what I have to say or what they have to say to me, they're not judging me. In fact, it's got nothing to do with me. This is how they feel. And I think that's one of the big things to learn in communication, is when somebody says something to you, it's really got nothing to do with you. It's all about them and how they feel. You can't make somebody feel, okay, yes, if you're going to beat somebody up, you're going to make them feel bad. But, I'm talking about in the normal world. You're not responsible for the reactions of other people. People fundamentally choose how they are going to react to what you're saying, because our emotions and our thoughts are all a choice. There's going to be a lot of people going, no, they're not, we can't do that, but they are. So knowing that, they're just telling me what's going on, and that it's not an attack on me, that they don't blame me, that there's no judgment there, that's huge for me as well. It's a lot easier for me to have an open conversation when I don't feel like I have to defend myself.
No, absolutely. That makes very good sense. I would be very interested, Tiffany. You talk about selecting certain words or not bringing certain words into conversations. And I would be very interested if also the style, let's call it, of conversations has changed since you became more aware. Meaning maybe it become less impulsive, or you take a minute or a breath or even a day to respond to certain things. I don't know if you have any hints or tips that worked for yourself and that you also use with your coachees, or that, just make sense to you, that sometimes you feel, okay, maybe I should not overreact in this very moment, but take that down, either go for a walk or wherever that could be. I would be very interested if something comes to mind.
Well, everything that you've just said is already like fabulous advice. 4 words, or rather 3 words that you shouldn't use, okay? Always, never, and but. So if you start a conversation with, you always do this, the person on the other side, as I said earlier, is just going to feel on the defensive. They're going to feel as if they have to defend themselves. You never, ever show up. Again, they're going to be defensive. So those are two words that I try not to use, unless it's to say something good. It's always sunny on a Sunday. Okay, that's fine. But if you're having a conversation, don't start with those ones. If you want to have an open and authentic and communicative and frank conversation, don't start with always or never. But is a word that you should always take out of your sentences. I always try to, if I can't do anything else, I'll stop so that I don't have to use but. And the example that I give, again, from my kids, my son was doing amazingly well at school. All right. He was also, riding that wave of confidence, I'm getting good grades, and I was a little bit worried that there was a little bit too confident there. So his grades were good though. They were not astounding. It was like, if you stop working, there's going to be a problem. So I wanted to have a chat to him. And this was a couple of years ago. And I had in mind to go in and say, I'm really proud of you, but I'm worried that if you don't work, your grades are going to go downhill. And I don't know what it was, but I actually sat and I thought about it and I thought, that doesn't sound very loving, because the but negates the first bit. So all he would hear is, I don't have any faith in you. I think your grades are going to go downhill because you're not working as I believe you should be working. And I thought, that's not going to work. So in fact, what I said to him was, I'm so proud of you and I love you. And I know that if you carry on working like this, you're going to ace this year. And he was like, oh, Mom, I love you. Thank you. It was received. It was received in the way that I wanted it to be received. So the but, if you say, I love you, but, I miss you, but, the but just cancels the good stuff and highlights the bad stuff. So those are my 3 words that should never be used. And what to do? Triggers. We all get triggered. Somebody says something and we can feel it. It's generally a physiological reaction. You can, when you feel that happening, if you can, take a breath, a really big breath, and ask yourself, why? Where is this coming from? What is going on? Okay. It's useful to keep in mind that what we hear is filtered through the lens of our life. So everything that has happened to us up to that moment is going to act as a filter and is going to what's the word I'm looking for? Is going to influence how we hear something. So if you can't do anything else, ask the question, hold on a second. You just said blah, blah, blah. I just heard blah, blah, blah. What did you mean? And I've had a lot of coaches who go, well, how am I meant to know what they're talking about? And if you don't know what they're talking about, ask them, clarify. It's such a simple thing, but we never think about it because we're directly into the reaction. Whereas taking a breath gives you the chance to respond. You're not reacting anymore, you're responding. You're actually going, okay, why? Why am I feeling like this? And if you feel that it's bigger than you, your tip on just removing yourself and going for a walk, fabulous. Do something that makes you calm. So that could be going for a walk, playing with the dog, listening to music, dancing like nobody's watching, whatever it is. Take yourself away from the situation, all right? But while you're doing that, just have a think about where all of this is coming from, because that trigger is in you, very often in your past, something you may not even be aware of it. It could be completely subconscious, but that trigger is definitely in you. Nobody can make you feel anything. And my biggest tip when you feel triggered is ask yourself, Do I want to be right? Or do I want to be happy? And based on that answer, you can move forward.
No, absolutely. I definitely do agree, because many of us are so used to want to be right, so that you wouldn't admit that the trigger might be there for a reason, and that we admit that this or that, what we have done, what we have said, may not have been the right thing to do. But many of us still choose to be happy. And I would be very interested, you talked about your, well, brief but still existent career in psychology, let's just call it, and at least your interest in psychology. And if we talk about triggers, if you're willing to share, it would be very interesting. You've mentioned a few approaches on how to deal with that, but if you realize a certain trigger for yourself, how do you deal with that? Do you expose yourself to that trigger more often? Do you try to avoid that triggering emotion, that triggering person, that triggering place? Do you have any hints on how to deal with those triggers? Is it like really inside yourself, dig deeper, figure out where does it come from, find a psychologist, anything that comes to mind?
Frontal lobotomy. No, nothing so dramatic. Triggers are basically based around interpretations, okay? And interpretations are exactly, somebody says something and we hear something else. We've interpreted. How many times have you heard somebody go, "Oh, I know what you mean," and you're like, "Actually, you have no clue." So that's the interpretation. So, for example, and there's so many things that can influence how you hear things. So there's how you've been brought up, there's what you believe, there's the belief, there's your values. And then there's also things like, did you sleep badly last night? Because if you slept badly, then you're going to be tetchy. Things are going to wind you up more easily than if you were fully rested. If you're under stress, again, you're going to be more sensitive. You're going to be more susceptible to the triggers. But a trigger, broadly speaking, as I said, is based on interpretation. And it is you hearing something different. I can't say that. You hearing something, all right? Somebody says A and you hear B. So the sort of the tip really is that you take a breath. It's about creating awareness of yourself, okay? Understanding where it's coming from. Understanding what is the emotion. Self-awareness is the beginning of everything, is the beginning of all change, is the beginning of all growth. So what is the emotion? What am I feeling right now? Because am I feeling frustrated? Am I feeling embarrassed? Am I feeling guilty? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling threatened? All right. Or am I just a little bit, fractious because it's a bad day and I just really can't be bothered with the whole thing? Where is it coming from? So what is the emotion? Where's it coming from? Do I feel it in my body? Because these things, they do, very often they appear in the body. So, for example, to give you a very sort of weird and wonderful example, where we live here in Mallorca, we're halfway up a mountain, is beautiful, all right? And a little bit further up the mountain, there is a viewpoint. Now, somebody couldn't be bothered to walk up to the viewpoint, and for some reason they dropped a pin on Google saying that the viewpoint is literally in front of my living room. Okay, so well onto private property, in front of the living room. We've had people sitting on the wall and I've gone out and go, "Would you like a table and chair?" And they've actually said, "No, I'm fine." So, and they will go, "But Google said that this is the viewpoint." And you're going, "Yeah, but land titles say something else." So my example is that when that happens, my heart starts pounding, okay? Why? It's just rude. So when I analyze it, why does that happen? Because one of my values is respect, and this is disrespectful. So my value is being pushed out of line, okay? That And so literally my heart starts pounding and that's it. I'm off. It's like, and I'm up for a fight. I can take as many breaths as you want. I'll be very polite, but I'll be like, excuse me, you do realize this is private property. And, when the person turns around and goes, oh yeah, but Google said, I'm like, I don't care. If Google says your house is a restaurant, So what is the physiological reaction that you're having to that trigger? It could be, something in your stomach. It could be your heart. It could be sweaty palms. It could be something that you can't put your finger on it, So understanding what it is, where it's coming from, what it feels like, and why is it that I'm being triggered, Has something happened to me in the past that I'm feeling threatened now, Very often people who have been in, some form of emotionally abusive relationship, when they're spoken to in a bad way or what they perceive to be a threatening way, they're triggered, understandably so. So you said, do I need to find a psychiatrist? It depends what the trigger is. Very often, and I've worked with a lot of people to get over their triggers, to understand their triggers and to get over their triggers. And it's not a question of exposing yourself to them more often. It's a question really of understanding them. And then understanding, why. Once you understand why, it's so much easier to go, well, that's not happening here, or that's not going to happen again, or, it's not the same person, it's not the same context, whatever it is. When you've understood why, interpretations are always based on things that have happened in the past. So, is when you bring it forward into the here and now, you go, well, what's another way of thinking about it? And interpretations are the mother of all misunderstandings. It's like, how many conversations have you had that ended in an argument? And if only you'd stopped and said, well, is there another way of thinking about this? A great tip. You hear something and it triggers you, okay? Take a breath and ask yourself, what would somebody who you respect, somebody who you trust, it could be your mother, it could be your partner, it could be your best friend, what would they think about what's just been said? So try and look at it from another perspective, to see whether maybe you're foggying or fudging the conversation a bit. What would they think? What would they hear?
No, I like that very much. And I may add to that, the interpretation somewhat builds up, right? So if you trigger me and I don't speak up, the next action or interaction we have may very well be influenced by such. And if we do that over days, or if we do that over months, or even over years, usually the result is not that it will solve itself, but that we basically build resentment and create more anger. And everything that you are now saying, I interpret in a way that's, well, let's call it negative, or that's rather not unfavorable for you and what you are saying. So I think that this is a very important component you raise here. The interpretation also of ongoing conversations or of ongoing relationships is such an important one. So thank you very much for pointing that out.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. And it is true that, again, it goes back to the emotions, because, it's the interpretations create emotions. The emotions are not dealt with. You suppress them, but that just creates resentment. You're absolutely right, which will rear its ugly head at some stage.
Tiffany, you talked about your values, and I would be very interested to hear what those are and when you became aware of them. Is that something that started for you very early? Is that something that started for you after your business career, towards the coaching career? What is it that comes to mind?
That is an amazing question. My values. So I'm going to start halfway through the question, and I'm going to say that last year I dedicated the whole year to becoming fully accredited, certified. I think I did 4 different certifications last year, ending with becoming an ICF, International Coaching Federation, ACC coach. That whole journey last year started with one question. So I signed up to IPEC to do their coaching course. And it started with one question: who are you? And I reacted in such an aggressive way that I actually surprised myself. It was a stupid question. What a stupid question. Who am I? And I think I probably stomped off from my desk. I was completely triggered by that one question. The thing is, I already had 2 years of coaching under my belt. So after a while, I stopped and I thought, okay, why is this such a difficult question for me to answer? Who am I? And I sat down and I realized that I hadn't got a clue as to who I was. And that's why I was embarrassed. I was ashamed that I couldn't answer the question. So it started a whole journey of discovery, and my values had been, let's say, heavily suggested to me. So they had been heavily suggested to me, and I hadn't really questioned. So we all grow up with values. A lot of our values that we truly believe are ours are not ours. They come from our family, from our society. They come from, our religious backgrounds, whatever it is, and we just take those as being our values. So then you have additional values that come from the people closest to you. I realized that I'd kind of grown up and I hadn't really questioned any of these things. So who was I? I had no idea. And when I started looking at it and I was thinking, there's a lot that's been going on in my life. So, for example, I had high blood pressure. I was on blood pressure medication from the age of 21. Why? There was no actual reason for that. So everybody put it down to stress, highly stressed. So I was very stressed. Yes, I was very stressed. Look, other things that came up as well in my life. And I realized, or at least I believe now, that all those things were because I was living out of alignment with what my values were. For whatever reason that was, I was living out of alignment with my values. So my values are my family. They're my top value. 100%. I value honesty. I value integrity. I value professionalism. I value. Gosh, I value hard work. I value people who are not afraid of hard work. I value discipline. I value consistency. I found out that one of my biggest values is collaboration. Is right up there with family. And all of these things became clear to me in the last year when I actually sat down and thought about it. It was like, what are the things that are really important to me? What are the things that really irritate me? So, for example, people who are late. That's why I apologize to you. It's a lack of professionalism, and it's not a judgment. It's just not. It goes against my value. I like to be there 5 minutes before. I like to be on time. I like to make an effort. I've always made an effort. I've never rocked up to my kids' school in pajamas and slippers, for example. Even if I didn't want to get dressed, even if I didn't feel like making an effort, I did for them. So it's a question of all of those things, and collaboration being one of my biggest ones right now. Everything that I do, any opportunity that I have, I'm immediately trying to figure out how I can do it with somebody, how we can make it work together. And so my values were something that are my awareness of my values is relatively new to me, in answer to your question. And since I have understood what's important to me, I found the peace. I've also found the courage to say no. I was a massive people pleaser until not so long ago. I'd say yes to everything, and they'd get massively upset with everybody because they'd dared to ask me a question, and I was the one who was stupid enough to say yes. It was very confused time. But now, it's I know myself. I'm aware of myself. The awareness is there. The acceptance is there. I've accepted the part that I played in everything that I've done in my life up until now. It's there was a great deal of I had no choice. All of those things that when you look in the past, and for all of us, guilt and shame lives in the past. Stress and anxiety lives in the future, but guilt and shame lives in the past. And all of those things you think, that you're not very proud of. I had no choice. And that's not true. We always have a choice. It may be uncomfortable. It may be difficult. It may be, not ideal, whatever. We might not like it, but we always have a choice. And I've accepted that I had a choice, and I made my choice. And I now have peace with that choice that I made. I also understand that, my values, I wasn't aware of them. Maybe because we didn't talk about values back then. I don't know. All of this is becoming more talked about. It's more, on the tip of everybody's mouth. Mental health, is a big thing now, largely thanks to, or in large part, thanks to the pandemic. And so all of these questions come up. So now that I know what my values are, I have the courage to be authentic to myself.
Thank you very much. And before we dig a little bit deeper on choice and having a choice, I would like to circle back to collaboration. If I read through the values that you mentioned, honesty, integrity, professionalism, hard work, discipline, consistency, and so forth, some may hear that they are very individualistic in a way, so really have a very strong, rigid picture of oneself. And collaboration for me sticks out. So I would be very interested, has collaboration always been something that you acted towards or acted upon, or were you a strong, professional, hardworking woman taking care of 2 children, still running a business, and so forth?
Yes, I was independent would be a light way of saying it. I was very I refused to ask for help ever. I never needed help. I always needed help. We all need help, but I didn't need help. I could do it by myself. And I always thought that asking for help was a sign of weakness. I now realize that it's a sign of strength. Understanding yourself and knowing that, we all need help. And sometimes, other people can just do it better than us. Or, there's so many things that, are tied up with asking for help. It can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be, financial. None of us can do it, all of this by ourselves. And yes, I was very much that sort of island beforehand. And so that's why collaboration is something that, is super important to me, but also came as quite a surprise. And surprise, no, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, shock, horror. No, pleasantly surprised, because it had never been part of my life before. And in fact, I was not a very good team player before. I kind of had my ideas, and that those were the ones really that needed to happen. So the transformation for me, now I love working in a team. I do everything I can to work in a team. It's so much, it's more fun, it's more fulfilling, and it's, so yeah, collaboration is new to me, but loving it,
It feels good. Wonderful. Yeah, I think it's very good and important to become aware of one's values and then harvest the superpowers of knowing what you actually value. And with that, Tiffany, I would like to circle back a little bit to choice. And you said that one always has a choice in life, and to a certain degree, or probably I would even agree to that, but many people, I suppose, would not necessarily agree to the statement that you always have choices in your life. And you already talked to your personal story quite a bit, but were there moments in your life when you felt you did not have a choice?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird because I felt like I didn't have a choice, although I knew I did, which makes no sense at all. I realized that. Um, it was a question of, if I don't do this, then I'm going to lose that. And because I'm going to lose that, I fundamentally have no choice. The thing is now, okay, looking back, of course I had a choice. I could have said, okay, I'm going to lose that. So be it. I chose to do something that I didn't want to do, that I didn't necessarily agree with, that was completely out of alignment with my values. I chose to do that because of my fear of losing something. So that's why I said, we always have a choice. The choice is very often uncomfortable or even unthinkable. To take a dramatic example, you're in a relationship that you are not happy in, but you think that you have no choice but to stay there because you are not financially independent, for example. Okay? You do have a choice. You can take your bag and you can walk out the door. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It's not ideal. The choice is there, though. It's... I know there's a lot of people going, oh, you don't understand. It is true. It is an uncomfortable truth that we always have a choice. But we tend to... There's a circle. I brought up the example of a relationship. There is a circle in any kind of change. So understanding that we have choice, first of all, is one of the great gifts of coaching, I believe. Because a lot of us have lost sight of the fact that we have choice. And once we realize that we still have choice, we're then able to make conscious choices, conscious decisions that lead to change. So until we accept that we have choice, we're never going to be able to change anything in our life. And that cycle of change is very often a vicious circle. So let's go back to the relationship thing. I'm really not happy in my relationship. I'm feeling unfulfilled. Nobody understands me, blah, 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 blah. So you get to that point where something happens. Very often we call it a traumatic event, but that sounds very dramatic. It could just be a massive argument. And you're like, that's it. I've had enough. I'm leaving. And you feel exhilarated and empowered because you've made the decision to leave. And you are thrilled. You're thrilled. You're going to make the change that you need to see in your life. Then you start to think about it. And you start going, well, it's going to be tricky. I don't have this and I don't have that. And what am I going to do about this? And we have a joint bank account or whatever it is. And doubt starts to creep in. And then you start to think, well, how bad is it really? The pain of making the change seems to be far greater than the pain we're feeling now. Or at least the pain of making the change seems to be far greater than the gain, the perceived gain that we're going to get. So you think, it was an argument, it was fine, it'll be fine, it'll get better. And you slip back into it. Up until the next time you have a massive argument and you start to go around again. So understanding that we have a choice, that it might not be easy, very often it's not. Growth always comes outside of our comfort zone. That is an unfortunate truth. You can't stay in your comfort zone and grow. It takes courage. It takes courage, and it takes, it takes a certain amount of willpower, I think, to say, okay, I have choice. I have choice. I am the captain of my own destiny. I can do whatever I want. And if I don't want to be here, well, then move. You're not a tree. But so many people go, I can't do that because, life's not fair and you don't understand and there's so many excuses. And it's just easier to remain and complain about how miserable our circumstances are.
Two words that I noted down during the example of being in a relationship that clearly doesn't serve you and that you would like to leave but then didn't leave is being consequent and self-belief. So what happens to your self-belief if you tell yourself, I'm going to leave this relationship, and you don't, and you do that 7 times, or you do that 13 times, or you do that whatever n we choose now? What does that impact your choice and your self-belief if you're continuing to do such activities to stay?
So self-belief. I think your self-belief diminishes every time we choose not to make a choice. Staying the same, choosing not to choose is actually a choice. And I think the problem is that we not only lose self-belief, but we lose respect for ourselves as well. And at the end of the day, and it's a massive cliche, but unfortunately it's true, if you don't respect yourself, if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't love yourself, how can you expect anybody else to do any of the above? So life is interesting. All right. I don't like the whole life is tough because that's just a limiting belief. It's like, oh, you hard work, meaning work is hard. That it doesn't have to be. You can choose to live the life you want. Very often we're blocked by something and we're not able to choose the life we want. Worse than that, a lot of people don't even know what life they want to choose. Okay, like me, who are you? I don't know. The next question is, what is your dream life? I'm like, I don't know. Have enough money to send my kids to university. I don't know. It's just bland. There was no color. There was no detail. So you have to have the awareness. You have to work on yourself, understand who you are, which sounds very kind of, I don't know, otherworldly, but it is very, very pragmatic. Who are you? How do you react to certain things? What do you love? What do you not love? What do you want out of life? I was thrilled. Last year was the first year I had any goals. I turned 50 last year, and it was the first year in my life that I set myself some goals, and I hit all of them, every single one of them. And I'm like, how have I got to this point in my life with no goals? Because I was just going from one thing to another. It was like, I don't know. It wasn't even, in some cases, it was one drama to another, but I was just, I don't know. I was on this lazy lagoon of life and I was just following the current, until I applied for a job on a coaching platform. Okay. And I had my family, oh, you're amazing. You're the best coach we ever know. You're going to get it. All right. So I've never been particularly confident of my abilities. I suffered massively from imposter syndrome. So I was trying to be confident in my abilities here, but I was thinking, and of course I didn't get it. And the reason why I didn't get it, because all of the certificates that I had got that were from accredited schools, I found out were only accredited by the school's dog, nobody else. Okay, literally nobody else could care less about these certificates. So at the end of 21, I thought, right, I either get myself certified by a school that somebody else recognizes, or I stop doing what I'm doing. And I went, no, I really want to do this. And the reason why I wanted to also get the certifications was I felt that there was something else to give my clients and I didn't have those tools and it was frustrating me. So I was like, no, I'm going to do this. This is what I want to do. I've found my passion and I'm going to follow it. And that's what I did. And so I said, I'm going to do IPEC and I'm going to get certified by IPEC. So there's 3 qualifications there. I did all 3. And I'm like, at the end of the year, I want to have my coaching hours and I'm going to pass the ICF exam. And I did. And I was like, boom. And it felt phenomenal. I also realized that that was just a stepping stone onto something else. So I took a moment and I celebrated. Now what? What do I want now? What am I going to do now? So there's the big picture. It's like me when I'm 90 years old. What does that look like? You know, fabulous, by the way. Going to be amazing when I'm 90. But, you know, it's like, what's going to happen up to there? What do I want out of life? And it was the first time that I'd actually asked that question. And I think so many people are just being taken along on life's current without having any control over what's going on in their life.
So what is it that you want to leave behind in this world once you're 90 or 120 or at whichever point that may happen?
Whichever point. What do I want to leave behind? I want to have been of service. I want to have made other people's lives easier. I want people to... It sounds horribly arrogant, but it doesn't come from a place of arrogance. At my funeral, I want people to say, you know, I'm really happy that I knew her. So it's everything I do is because I want to help other people. So it's how can I help you? You know, how can I help you? I'm a big believer in doing whatever I can. Okay, I give my time. Very often I give my time because I know that somehow along the way that time will come back to me. That time will be paid back to me. It will come back in some way. And so that's where the collaboration comes in as well. But just being of help, you know, and people who, we all have days, we all have periods in our lives. Sometimes it's longer than days where we feel very alone. And the people who are in my life, I'm very conscious of keeping in touch with them, you know, checking in with them, finding out if they're okay. You know, I meet people and I can tell that I can help them. So it becomes a thing with me. I need to help them. So I do a lot of pro bono work. So being of service, knowing that I've made somebody's day better, knowing that I've made somebody's day easier, because I've been through so much in my life. There are so many different examples of what I've had to endure, which are all tools now. So that's all fine. You know, it's all, coaching has given all of that a purpose. But there's so many times in my life where I just would have loved to have had the courage or had somebody to say, can I help you? What can I do for you? So that would have made my life very different.
You talk quite a bit about giving and being of help. How often do you today ask for help yourself? And who? Actually,
and to who? Well, quite a lot more. I have 2 friends who are both coaches, and depending on issues that come up with me, depends on who I'll book a session with. So I've realized that it's not a question of, you know, it's not that sharing is caring. That's not what coaching does. Coaching gives you space to just sort through the noise in your head. So to give you an example, big thing in my life, big change. Change is always constant. It's the only constant that we have. But big change in my life is my youngest is going off to university, which was inevitable. And it's going to be the first time in my life in 23 years that I don't have a child at home. So thankfully I have 2 dogs, and a husband that I can baby. So that's fine, but no children, you know, not actual children. So it's a big change for me. And it was something that I was handling super badly. And so I was working with one of my coaches to understand what was going on, understand where all that was coming from. And in fact, the big aha moment for me was when I realized that I was looking at all of this from my point of view, when in fact this had nothing to do with me. It was all about my son and his life. So life is self-awareness is a constant journey, and it's something that I will never master. Okay, it's there will always be things that I can learn about myself, and asking for help now is definitely something that I am far better at. I will reach out and help. The financial help is still something that I have issues with, but I am getting a lot better with. The emotional help, definitely better. Yeah, I used to always be the one, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? Tell me about you. How's your day? So now I am much better at saying to people, I need to talk. I'm feeling overwhelmed or whatever.
I need to go for this walk, or I need to give something back. Tiffany, thank you so much for that very personal insight on, many things. Your coaching journey, emotions, choice. I think we discussed a lot. And I have a couple of questions that I ask each and every of my podcast guests. But before we go there, is there any particular theme or topic that you deem we haven't discussed in great detail and where you would like to shine a little bit light before we go there?
That's Pandora's box. Once you open that ain't never getting closed again. There's so much. I think that the crux of it is that, is to remember that we always have choice, and that once we know we have choice, that we can make any change in our life that we want. And if you're not sure what that is, then maybe look for a coach that you can work with who can help you sort through that, because I think choice is just so choice of your emotions, how you react, learn to respond, choice in your actions, choice in everything. Have the self-awareness to be able to truly live the life that you want. And if you don't know what that is, then find somebody who you can work it out with, because it's so important to do that. There's a lot of things, I think awareness of self is probably a big one. I daren't say anything else because we're going to be talking for another 10 hours, so I'll keep quiet. Clarity, clarity, choice, change.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you very much, Tiffany. And that leads me to the first of the 3 final questions for today's podcast episode. And you opened up with it. And my question would be, what is it that makes you hopeful?
What is it makes me hopeful? Life makes me hopeful. It's right now. It's is watching. My kids are at that great stage where they're on the cusp of their lives. So my daughter's in 3rd year of her course. I know that she's going to take the world by storm, and I know every mother says that, but she's phenomenal. My son, also phenomenal, is going to do something. I'm sure he's going to make a fortune doing something that nobody's ever thought of again, or at least I haven't thought of. But they're both of them are just so amazing and so caring and kind and considerate, and it's watching them on the cusp just fills me with hope for the future, for my future, their future. And knowing that there are people like them in this world, it just gives me hope. There's a lot of hope right now.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It's always good to have hope, I suppose. And Tiffany, who are your mentors and whom do you personally look up to?
Who do I personally look up to? My mentors, there are people who have massively impressed me in my life, one of whom is Nelson Mandela, who I was fortunate enough to meet. I had lunch with him, don't you know? Okay, there was about 300 of us, but that's beside the point. His humility, his capacity for forgiveness, his hope for the future, I just found massively inspiring. He is a man who could walk into a room and fill it with his charisma. So yeah, Nelson Mandela, definitely. And then, then I'm going to go with Abraham Lincoln. None of the influences are alive, unfortunately. Huge personality, amazing man, amazing what he achieved. My mentor in life, my mentor in business, my parents, especially recently, I have to be honest, not so much before, but recently, most definitely in the last 10 years. It's, and then the people, there's certain people who, that I studied with, that I have a connection with, and they're all amazing in their individuality. So, there's not one person who I look to as a mentor. It's like I like to look at their strengths and draw on those strengths.
And I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. And that leads us for today's last question, and it's a rather hypothetical one, and I call it the 3 truths. So, Tiffany, I would like you to imagine that you're traveling all by yourself in space, actually for quite some time. Could be a couple of months, but even could be a couple of years. And after all that solo travel, you encounter a human-like species, but they can only process 3 facts or 3 truths about humanity before they decide whether or not they want to get to know us. What is it that you tell them?
Boy. 3 things. As my dad says, I talk too much, so that's going to be tough. 3 things. I think the first thing would be that given that they're looking to visit or not visit, my first thing would be that humanity is fundamentally kind. My second thing would be that there is a small group of very powerful humans that are very keen on destroying us. Despite all the movies that have been made, they still want to go there. And the third truth would be that despite that, I do believe that the inherent goodness and kindness of people will prevail. I do believe that. And I think that if people, and it's interesting because the way that the world is changing now, that we're opening up, that we're sharing more with each other, that it's becoming okay to have emotions and share those. That also gives me hope, because I think that the world will become a much more stable place. So yes, kindness, power, and hope, I think, would be the 3 truths.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those 3 and really for everything today, Tiffany. And yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for being a guest on the Just Another Mindset podcast. And if there's any final message that you have for our audience, it's all yours.
My final message would be, whatever you want, you can have. And just, if you can see it, you can do it. Thank you very much. And if I can help, obviously, anybody finding that vision, finding the clarity, then they can find me at tiffanybarnard.com.
And I will, of course, make sure to link all your socials so that people will reach out. With that, Tiffany, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. You take care of yourself. Thank you, Ismael.
If you enjoy this podcast and learn from it, please feel free to share this episode with a friend or two, and make sure to subscribe to the Just Another Mindset podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please use the next 10 seconds to give the Just Another Mindset podcast a rating, and know that you will help me to create more meaningful content like this, and also that it will help other people to find this content and get inspired as well. If there is any future topic or guest that you would like to hear more about on the Just Another Mindset podcast, please let me know by leaving a comment on YouTube or sending a mail directly to contact@ismaelwondergarten.com. And if nobody told you lately, be reminded that you are worthy, you matter, and you can achieve anything.
Be yourself. Positive. Just another mindset.